Thank you all very much for coming along and for your interest in tonight's webinar. My name is Hilda Mulrooney, and together with Katherine Markwell, so you can see Katherine at the bottom of your screen, we're going to be talking about contributing to various consultations, particularly concentrating on PEN and also the NICE guidelines. So I'm just going to run you through some background things first of all. So, just to give you an idea about us, this is a co-presented webinar. So myself and Dr. Katherine Markwell. So Katherine and I are going to be handing over to each other at various points in the webinar, and we've put a bit of information about ourselves at the on the screen that you can see now. So Katherine's currently working in UCLan, and she is a senior lecturer in human nutrition and dietetics with interests in obesity, gastroenterology and public health. I'm Associate Professor in Nutrition at Kingston University in London. My background is in primary care and public health. We're both involved in different ways with the British Dietetic Association. So I'm currently Best Practice Officer of the Obesity Group of the British Dietetic Association, and both Katherine and I are on a NICE PEN Best Practice group of the BDA, which is how we got involved in this webinar. We're all probably very familiar with Teams working now. You know, that's the last year and a half has made us all very well used to working online. But just to ensure that you're all aware that this is being recorded, there's no need to have cameras on. And in fact, it's quite helpful not to have your cameras on from a bandwidth perspective. Also, if you can remain muted, that would be fantastic. But you're very, very welcome to put any questions or comments that you have in the chat, because those are being moderated, and we'll be able to pick those up, any comments or queries that you have. So, you know, don't be shy. Okay, so just running you through what we're going to be covering. So we're going to do a brief background, first of all, into becoming a reviewer, and then we're going to go through two different reviewing opportunities that are available through the BDA. So the first is PEN, so going to be covering what it is and contributing to it, and Katherine's going to cover that. Then we're going to look at NICE, and again, a bit of an overview on NICE, and then an overview on contribution to NICE. And where possible, we're going to pull out some experiences of different BDA members who've contributed in different ways to these consultations. We're going to look at how you get started if this is something that interests you and you're maybe thinking about dipping your toes in the water, and also just clarify really what are the benefits of being a reviewer from your own perspective. So I think I now hand over to Katherine. So, yeah.
Thank you, Hilda. Yes, so I'm going to give a little bit of a PEN overview and a bit about reviewing. I know from the practitioners, I'm at a university, but the practitioners I engage with, not everyone is using PEN. So before you become a reviewer, if you're not familiar, I'm going to give a little bit of information about PEN. So PEN is short for Practice-Based Evidence and Nutrition PEN System. And we have a little poll that Charlotte's going to assist with about who's used PEN and when did you use it?
We have had 11 votes on people using PEN. 36% have, 64% haven't used them in the past. And then when and why have all gone in the chat. So we'll capture that and have a look over.
Wonderful. Great, thank you. So, yeah, so not everyone's used it. So a little bit of an introduction so you can use this benefit of your BDA membership. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it currently includes. It includes a lot of information, so it's good to get a little bit of an introduction into navigating around it. You can see from the chat that a lot of people have used it in research, as a student, to get up-to-date practice information, and they're the main ways it's used. And so the great thing about PEN is it's international. So it was originally from the Canadian setting, but it's been picked up in the UK and many other countries around the world. So it's about pooling our resources across our small profession in our area of expertise. So it means that the workload's reduced across the world. And it's one of the top value benefits of your BDA membership. If you aren't currently using it, this is where you can sign up. I believe these slides and the recording will be available later. But you can sign up, and you can also follow on different social media settings. If you have Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram. So why use pen? So some of the insights you were just given probably will help. So as busy practitioners, of course, it's challenging to maintain an accurate overview of the evidence base and all general and specialised areas. And it can be a real challenge. So hopefully this takes some of the challenge out. So when people need to get across a new area quite quickly, it can also be useful. The PEN system condenses and summarises nutrition and dietetic evidence base and more than 200 nutrition and dietetic related topics. So many topics, and it's always expanding with new areas of interest. And of course, it also translates this for you into practical information. There's also links to up-to-date tools and resources as well. It's a reliable global source because it's collated by dietitians and it has graded evidence. If you're short of time, you can access it really quickly. It's included, it doesn't cost you anything more. If you're moving into new areas or a freelance dietitian with an unusual case, it can be helpful. If you're moving more into that GP practice, that emerging area, it might be helpful because you might be expanding your practice. Of course, it's really helpful for students as well. And if you wish to find out more about an area without being able to access a full library database. Of course, there is a main limitation, but it may differ by UK guidance or trust policy. So always cross-check the information. And one of the things we need to incorporate it effectively in practice in the UK is more UK dietetic reviewers. So the main feature, if you go into PEN, it includes a searchable database, and that leads to all the information. And these number of different reviewed items for different clinical conditions. So if you go in, if you log in the website, you get a little search and you can type anything in there. And it will come up for most topics with a variety of things down the side. Practice guidance toolkits, PEN handout collections, and knowledge pathways, incorporated a lot of key information. So for instance, if you were just to search cardiovascular disease, it comes up with 381, I'm looking at this on a smaller screen, I think it's 381 results. Then you can hone in on different practice questions, practice guidance toolkits, so you can make that a lot more specific, but you can see there's actually a lot of information available. And you can also hone it a little bit further and make it country context. So for instance, if you're looking at an evidence summary, it might have different options, different countries, and the guidance available. So this is the type of information that needs to be updated regularly. So the UK one, you can look at the flags, and there's different ways to search for that as well. And you can see briefly in advance of clicking on it if the UK information is available and that you can click on it. If you have a knowledge pathway, it is practice questions. If you click on a knowledge pathway, it has a lot more of information. So the practice questions that are answered. So key things you might want to know quickly in that topic area and the information that answers that. Background information and an evidence summary in that area, related tools and resources flagged for the particular international context. And there's also a practice guidance toolkit. What's interesting in the practice guidance toolkit, although it's not the BDA model and process for nutrition and dietetic care, it is the international nutrition care process used by a lot of the other countries in the database, does incorporate some similar stages, so it can still be used as a reference, even though it's obviously not the main part of your practice. So if you're looking at an example of a practice question and key practice points, so a practice question and a key practice point. So each practice point provides a succinct evidence-based recommendation or answer to a dietetics practice question. So these are the type of things we need people to create, a question that's relevant to the practice and then to answer it with key recommendations. And an evidence summary is also really useful, has the key information, so the key literature associated, and it's graded evidence, so the level of which that evidence can be reliably is reliable and can be used in practice. I'll talk a little bit more about the graded evidence. I'm sure you're all familiar with levels of evidence and the specific way they're used in PEN when we get to the reviewing section. If you were to look at Practice Guidance Toolkit, so if you search for Practice Guidance Toolkit or Practice Toolkit with a key term, comes up a bit more information. And this is where it has the key nutrition informations and it has a bit on assessment, monitoring and evaluation. So a bit similar to our stages, nutrition diagnosis, some example statements for that, and a bit of information about nutrition intervention. Of course, this isn't UK context specific, and we've got a lot of our own guidelines, but it is still useful, particularly for students as well, wanting to investigate more on a topic as well. The related tools and resources, you can see you can actually search there. You can search for what the audience should be that receives these, the professional or consumer, what country, and what language. So it can be really useful if you're working with different cultural groups as well to see if there's evidence available. If you want PEN news, you can get updates quite regularly about the latest trending topics and other things and new resources that are available. So what we need more of in our setting is more review in the UK context. So I'll talk a little bit about the main areas that the BDA is spearheading in this area. So what is reviewed in PEN? Practice questions, so updated and new. So things that have been updated, previously available, and new topics. But not just the topic, but also the content within the topic, as well as background documents. So it'd be great to have more reviewers. These are the areas we might need help to create from new, review, and adapt to the UK. Generally, reviewing guidelines focus on the currency of evidence, the quality of evidence, the accuracy of the synthesis, the clarity of the content, the relevancy for practice, the relevancy for the country, and also related tools and resources within the country. So all of these things, you're very familiar with critiquing the evidence. They're all things that you know how to critique, add that extra information, question the information that's there. So making sure the evidence is up to date, high quality, an accurate synthesis, and that's clear for other people. So every dietitian that's been trained has this ability. Just note that it's a Canadian database, so the spelling may be a little bit different. And grammar, there's other ways to check that. So if you want to start reviewing a practice question topic, check, are the right questions being asked? You know your specialty, you know what needs to be asked. Are these the right questions for that practice area? And also, are there any questions that aren't being asked but should be? So this is the first point, looking at the question topic. Then when you're actually reviewing the practice question content, are all of the highest quality reviews, studies or guidelines included? So is everything that needs to be included included? Is the recommendation succinct, clear, practice-based and reflects the evidence? Is the evidence summary practical and is it relevant for your country? Is it a good overall summary? And is the grade of evidence appropriate? You can query that if you don't think the grade of evidence has been captured correctly. And there's also, in a practice question, there's also a remarks comment section. It doesn't have to contain that, but it can contain relevant information that's not part of the evidence statement, but is needed to support the recommendation. So it doesn't need to have something in it, but it can be useful to have something in it. And does the rationale provide useful information on the proposed or known mechanisms of action, reasoning behind research hypotheses and explanations for theories? And do the evidence statements for each article used contain appropriate details? And then to further round that off, giving the evidence a grade. So the levels of evidence are quite similar to other areas in practice. So grade A, of course, supported by good evidence, so good quality, relevant, randomised controlled trials with consistent findings or a systematic review of the same. And of course, that reducing depending on the study design. So fair evidence, studies with minor methodology concerns with weaker designs or with differing results. Grade C, the conclusion is supported by limited evidence or expert opinion, of course, a lower quality of evidence. So studies of weak design, or for answering that particular question, or the substantial uncertainty attached to the conclusion because of inconsistencies among the results from different studies. And grade D, a conclusion is not possible or extremely limited because evidence is unavailable and of poor quality and or is contradictory. The great thing, if you were to write some of this information from you, someone else will review it. So you can, you know, make your best judgment, and then someone else will confirm that that is correct. So it's not all on you if you become a reviewer. You also, there's extra information in the PEN website that the BDA will signpost you to if you undertake this, including the grading checklist. Another area that we tend to do a lot of is reviewing background documents. So background includes general information, general knowledge information about a topic, and it's useful to a new practitioner or a good refresher. Reviewers can include relevant comprehensive external links, but they cannot contain advertising or sponsorship. So this is an example from a BDA member who's allowed us to use that with her permission, Victoria. So she has reviewed someone else's work and made some comments to help clarify it further. So for instance here, the person has stated in the original item, firstly, the diet of those who have a higher alcohol intake may be of poorer quality and lack nutrients. Higher than what? So a nice clear question to find out more about what that means specifically, to increase the clarity of that and the number of units. And then here, key practice 2.2 about meat. You know, asking a good question, should this be red and processed meat? Because this is about nutrients and dietary factors associated with an increased risk of developing breast cancer. And in terms of the rationale, iron may raise the risk of breast cancer as it can interact with estrogen and also contributes to oxidative stress. And then, you know, this fair comment, you need to acknowledge this has only been shown in animal models. So if you know your practice area, you'd be able to read something like this in your practice area and check that evidence, summarise it comprehensively, accurately, succinctly, and could be used very quickly by someone who needed it in practice. I'm going to stop presenting and let Hilda take over to do this part. Thank you.
Thanks, Katherine. That's great. I think I should have control of the slides now. So I'm going to just talk through NICE and the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence and an overview of it, and also reviewing for NICE. And again, many of you may already have experience of reviewing for NICE. You're probably already very familiar with it at the very least. So you'll know that NICE has lots of different components to it. So if you go onto the website, there are pathways, there's the British National Formulary, there's evidence search, journals, databases, and if you're in the NHS, you can access a lot of the data, the journals through Open Athens. But of particular relevance for this evening are the NICE guidelines and recommendations, and also the quality standards and indicators. And they're particularly of importance to us because they impact so much on patient care and service user care, but also on dietetic practice and, in fact, practice within multidisciplinary teams, full stop. You know yourself that NICE guidance is very often used to help CCGs, Public Health England and so on to decide about resource use and how practices should be set up and how resources should be allocated. So it's really important that we're involved in NICE because it potentially has a huge impact on sort of priority areas and decisions about care and staffing. So I would imagine all of us are familiar with NICE, at least at the level of looking things up, if not reviewing. But to get more involved with it would be really fantastic, because it has such important implications for dietetic practice. So thinking about reviewing for NICE then, what are the options? So you can input via a specialist group of the British Dietetic Association, and or you can input through a BDA-wide consultation. So because there's only, you can only have 2 responses from any organisation, sometimes if more than one special interest group wants to respond to a consultation, in that case you tend to have all of the specialist groups that want to feed into one big response that goes in under the umbrella of the BDA. Other times it might be that you're just feeding in a response on behalf of a single specialist group of the BDA. You might also decide that you want to do this as part of your work, so outside of the BDA. So you could register as a stakeholder to respond to NICE consultations as an individual or on behalf of your workplace. I would say if you're thinking of doing that on behalf of your workplace, it's probably a good idea to just sound that out and make sure that you're not going to be stepping on any toes, or check out whether there are policies in place about whether you're allowed as an individual to respond on behalf of the organisation, or is there somebody that should be kind of looking at the response and making sure that they're okay that that's going out on behalf of an organisation. But you'll know about what the situation is within your own workplace. For me, my interest in NICE comes from my role at the moment. I kind of forget which role I have because it's had different names, different iterations of the role within the obesity special interest group. But I think I'm now best practice officer, but I was consultations officer, and effectively it's doing the same thing. So I tend to be the person who pulls together the responses for consultations to organisations like NICE on behalf of the obesity specialist group. As well as responding to consultations as a reviewer, you also have the possibility of becoming a committee member in NICE. And so sometimes NICE will put out advertisements and say that we're particularly looking for a dietitian to take part in such and such a consultation and to be part of a committee for X amount of time. And in that case, you submit an application. You may well have a virtual interview, and you will then take part in the committee meetings and really be responding in a much more immediate and face-to-face way than you would be just through writing a response to a document. So we'll talk through each of those. I've done both, and several other members of the BDA have sat on committees of NICE and have fed back as reviewers for NICE, so that we've a lot of experience as a profession in this. So the first thing to do is to register as a stakeholder for NICE. So you need to have an account, and so you set up an account using their main website, and all you need to do that is to have your email and to have a password and use your first name and your surname. You can then search for whichever guideline that you'd like to register for, and you click to register for it. Now you can check with the BDA to see whether there's already other people interested in in consulting, in responding to the consultation, because as I say, if there's more than 2 within the profession, then it needs to go in as a joint response from the BDA, rather than having lots of piecemeal responses coming in, some of which won't be accepted by NICE because they'll only accept 2 from an organisation. So you've got an example on the screen in front of you where it's type 1 diabetes in adults, diagnosis and management. And if you're interested in that, you would just click on becoming a stakeholder. So if you try to do that and you find that you're getting a message to say that you can't be a stakeholder because you're trying to register as a BDA member, that means that more than 2 people have already said they want to respond on behalf of the BDA, and in that case you would have to go via the BDA itself. So if you email the consultations email, so that's consultations@bda.uk.com, and maybe if that could go into the chat, it'll be on the slides anyway, but if maybe it goes into the chat as well, that would be really helpful. That is something that you will then know about, and you can take part in the wider BDA response. So just thinking about a specific example, just from the obesity group, and I'm not suggesting that this is the only way of doing things or even that it's the best way of doing things, but this is just within the obesity group what we do and what's worked for us. So what we decided, and this is many years ago now, I think I was an ordinary committee member at the time. We had no formal mechanism to responding to any consultations at all, and there was some big report that came out on obesity, and I was reading through it and I was thinking, gosh, no, there's no dietetic voice on this. There was absolutely nothing. There was no representation from the profession at all. And I just thought that's ridiculous. We have a special interest group of obesity professionals. We should be having a voice. So I suggested that it might be a good idea for us to start being more proactive in responding to consultations. And from that, the committee agreed that we would set up a special committee post, so that one committee member would take responsibility, and that happened to be me. As a specialist group, we haven't really formally said, well, these are the groups, these are the consultations we'll respond to, and these are the ones that we don't. If I come across a consultation that I think we should respond to, I'll normally email the committee and say, look, this is in the pipeline. I think it's really important we have a voice. What do you think? And I don't think I've ever had a situation where the committee have said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So the majority of the guidelines and the consultations I've taken part in, as it happens, are nice consultations because they have so many. But I've also responded to ones from the Scottish Intercollegiate Guidelines Network, and I've responded to the Academy of the Medical Royal Colleges. I've responded to some from the House of Commons and the House of Lords when they've had, when they've had inquiries into obesity and weight management. I've even responded to consultations on education strategy where they were looking at things like whether food and nutrition should be included as an A level or a GCSE and things like that. And also there was a World Health Organization consultation, and I thought, yeah, why not? We should have a voice. So if I hear of something, then I will put a response together. But if other committee members hear of something, they'll often drop me an email and say, have you heard about such and such? Do you think it's worth us putting in a response? And likewise, if the BDA come across something that they think is relevant to us, they'll usually drop us an email and say, are you already responding to this? Are you aware that this is in the pipeline? So there are some where you have to register as a stakeholder, like NICE, and then there are others where you don't necessarily have to register as a stakeholder. But as I say, for NICE, you do have to register as a stakeholder for the relevant guidelines. Once up an account with NICE, they tend to email you directly and say, we're thinking of updating such and such a set of guidelines, and they'll normally send you a whole kind of list with bullet points, and you can just have a look. And I tend to look for anything that's related to weight or obesity, and so it might be something on, say, type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease. It might be something that's related to obesity but isn't specifically obesity, and I'll often look through that to see, is there anything there that's relevant for the obesity specialist group. My role is to put together the draft feedback. So rather than everybody starting with a blank page and trying to put together what their thoughts are, we agreed as a committee that probably the most efficient thing to do was for me to start the ball rolling. So I'll read through all the documentation and I'll put together what I think are the main points, that the main responses that we want to make are, and then I'll send them to the committee and say, can I have your feedback by such and such a date? So there'll normally be a deadline by which the response needs to go back to NICE. So I'll build in a bit of room, before that, and I'll give the committee as much time as possible to have a look at what I've put together and to look at the NICE documentation or whichever group I'm putting a response together for. And then I have time to pull together from what their comments are. There might be additional points I need to make. Some of my wording might be incorrect. I might have the wrong end of the stick about something, whatever it might be. And then I'll send off the finalised version. If there's time, and it does depend on what the deadlines are like, if there's time, I will also send out an email to the members of the obesity specialist group. So not just the committee, but the actual members, and say, as a group, we're putting together a response to X, Y, and Z. And if you'd like to comment, please contact me. It does depend on how much time is available, because if there's only like a 2 2-week turnaround on something, then I'm not going to have time to get anything more than responses from the committee, never mind responses from everybody else. So it does depend. So I then pull together all of the feedback and submit the final response. And I was calculating the other day, and it's well over 100 responses I've done now, because I've been doing this for a number of years now. And this is just an example on the screen in front of you. This is one that was to one of the weight management consultations. And this was a nice response. So they will send, once you're a stakeholder, they will show you, this is the guidance that we've put together. This is the template response form that we want you to fill in, and then they'll also give you access to any additional documentation that might be useful for you. So sometimes there might be evidence synthesis or whatever that, or a quality impact assessment or economic impact assessment and so on that have been undertaken as part of their process. So all of that is made available to you. So you have a feedback form that's already there, and you just then populate it with your points. And you can see that it's a very structured feedback form. So on the left-hand side, you've got the number. So that's just point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, or so on. So you just add in, however many points you want to make. And you have to put in the page number and also the part of the guideline that you're referring to. So some of your comments might be general about the whole guideline or the whole document. And so it applies, throughout the document. And others might be very specific comments to very specific points that they've made, and you have to make it clear which you're talking about. So that's why where it says page number, for some of them I've just got general. That's where it's a general comment that applies throughout the document. And then in others I've got a literal page number, and then they want to know the line number as well. So that's, again, I suppose from their perspective, they're going to be getting feedback from lots of different people and lots of different organisations, and they want to make it as straightforward to navigate for themselves as possible. And so you can see I've just typed in some general points there. So the document just, you can add as many points as you want to. You can just add in extra lines if you've got a lot to say. So sometimes the feedback might be very short, and in other times it might be extremely long. But that's what a nice feedback form looks like. Just with regards to being a committee member, that's something else that some BDA members also have experience of. And in my case, I was a specialist committee member for a quality standards advisory committee, and that was between 2014 and 2015. So we were looking at quality standards for children and young people, prevention and lifestyle weight management programs. So it was an obesity quality standard that they were looking to update. So there was an advertisement put out by NICE, and I answered that, sent off my CV, etc., etc. And I was given the position. These are not paid positions, and the reviewing positions are not paid either. So you're definitely not doing it for the money. So there's no money involved whatsoever. But I did have to travel to Manchester twice for 2 face-to-face committee meetings. So your travel, you can get reimbursed for your travel. But it's really great. I mean, for me, because so much of what I do is just, I'm doing it by myself. I'm looking at documents. I'm trying to figure out what are the main things we need to say here. What are the, I think they've got the wrong end of the stick. What is it we need to pull out? What are the things we want to highlight? So most of that I'm doing by myself. And even when I get feedback from other people, they're just emailing it to me. So what was lovely about being on the committee was that very collaborative sort of sense of working together in a face-to-face situation. Obviously, this was pre-pandemic, so we were literally face-to-face in Manchester. I signed up to a commitment that was about 18 months long, but that didn't mean that I was working on it full-time for 18 months or anything like that. There are times when there's a lot of reading to be done, and then obviously there are these meetings that you go to, which are kind of half day long. So between travel and the meeting, you're looking at a full day. But that's all. You're not having to give up the day day job to do stuff like this. And as I say, it was a large multidisciplinary group. In the first meeting, there was a lot of debate and discussion about what do we think the key things are, and NICE had some suggestions that they already thought we should be including, so we were kind of debating about those. And then we put together a draft document, which was then circulated from all of the discussion in the first meeting. The draft document was then put together and circulated prior to the second meeting, and we then had to debate the changes that we'd suggested and agree a final version. And it was a really interesting process to go through. I definitely recommend it. So, and as I say, other people, other dietitians who've taken part in committees, I think would also echo that it is a really useful thing to do. So this is another example, just because obviously I'm talking from the obesity perspective, but NICE is way more than that. So this is one on colorectal cancer, and it's an example of a guideline consultation. So what NICE is asking for there, and this is very common when they ask for feedback on a document, they may also say, well, we have some specific questions that we'd like you to consider as well in your answer. So as well as commenting on the draft document, you might be asked specific questions, and that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you can see on the screen in front of you. So particular areas that they want feedback on, and they're often things about whether there'll be particular points that they may propose that might impact more or less on practice, whether there might be particular groups that might be disadvantaged by something that they're proposing, and if so, who those might be and how might the disadvantage be lessened, those sorts of things. And if you've any additional evidence to add, you can add it. So this example for colorectal cancer is very similar to what I've seen in many of the NICE consultations that I've responded to as well. And again, you can see for the colorectal cancer example, we have a similar kind of response table. So again, the template feedback form from NICE, regardless of what the topic area is, the template feedback form is very similar. So once you get used to it, you know, it doesn't tend to change. Okay. So thinking then about getting started, if hopefully you're thinking about possibly getting started and getting going, and I think we have a poll for now. Charlotte, are you able to put the poll up?
Yep, just doing that now.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much. So I think the last poll was looking at whether any of you had ever used PEN. Now we're thinking about whether you've ever reviewed for PEN before. So have you ever actually done any reviewing for PEN or not? So if you want to just submit your vote to that. Just going to submit it myself. I can see 13 responses in. That's great. Okay, they're slowly creeping in, creeping up. Do you want to go through the responses at the end when all of the questions from the poll are done, Charlotte? Because I think there's another question or two to come.
Yeah, we've got one more poll question, but we didn't say we were going to give away the results this evening. It's just for us to review internally. Okay. So this is we're not going to know. I don't know if you want to type anything into the chat though. If you have been a PEN reviewer before, I can just say that I've only just dipped my toe in the water with PEN reviewing now, and I've done 2 reviews for PEN, both of them fairly recently, and I'm just looking at my notes here to see what they were, but I did one that was a background document, and that was to entomophagy, so it was eating of insects, and looking to see whether it was relevant to the UK. And then I commented on another knowledge pathway, which was on weight or obesity assessment. So I'm just dipping my toe in the water with this stuff too. And I can see Jordana's saying that you've completed 1 review for PEN. That's great. Okay, so is there another poll question then, please, Charlotte? Which I think might be about NICE, is it? Yes. Have you been a NICE reviewer before? Okay, so if you don't mind just responding to that, that would be great. And again, if anybody has any comments that they'd like to put in the chat with regards to any experiences they've had reviewing for NICE or for PEN, that would be great.
Okay, so the responses to that are slowly creeping up. Let's give it another couple of seconds. Okay, so do you want to shut the poll now, Charlotte, and I'll carry on. Is that okay? Yeah, it might be possible to share the anonymous results. Is that possible, Charlotte, to just say how many people have been reviewers for NICE or for PEN?
Yeah, so for PEN, there's been 15 votes, 27% said yes, 73% said no. And for NICE, 14% said yes and 86% said no.
Okay. That surprises me, because I would have expected more people to have reviewed and to have had experience reviewing for NICE than for PEN. I suppose just because NICE has been around for longer. That's really, really interesting. Thank you very much, guys, for that, and thank you, Charlotte, for feeding back. So, you know, maybe tonight you might feel a bit differently, and you might think, well, perhaps I'm going to give it a go. So you might want to think then, how do I get started and what's in it for me? There's definitely no money in it. That's something to be very clear about. But like so much of what we do, it's not really about the money. It's about the experience, and also what we can give in terms of our expertise. So there is a reviewers forum that the BDA has set up, and so if you email info@bda.uk.com, and you can then have access to the reviewers forum, I beg your pardon, and it will tell you what's available at the moment, particularly in PEN, what reviewing opportunities are available. So you get sent these emails to tell you, you know, such and such has come in, we're looking for a reviewer to do such and such. If anybody's interested, email us back. And so that's really useful. I suppose with NICE, unless you're registered as a stakeholder, you're not necessarily going to be aware of what's needing a response, because you have to very actively go and have a look. So because I'm already registered as a stakeholder, I tend to go on and have a look and see what's coming up and what do I think the obesity group might be interested in responding to. And sometimes I get it wrong. So sometimes I'll sign up to something that I think, well, this looks like it has potential to be relevant to the obesity specialist group. But when I actually read the document, it isn't, because what they're looking at is not quite, not quite relevant. And in that case, we don't submit a response. So again, if there are things that you think you'd like to be interested in, or your group might be interested in, then you can share relevant items through the reviewers forum. So that's one way of getting involved. What happens if you're involved in PEN, you get a letter of contribution from PEN, and that is really useful for CPD, because of course with HCPC registration, we all have to have very good evidence of our CPD and of our ongoing CPD. And also, I guess, if you're going for particular positions, if you're changing your job, having those sorts of external examples of things that you've been involved in really shows what kind of a healthcare professional you are. So that's really useful evidence for you. You also get included in the monthly research e-newsletter as a thank you. Your name is included there, and there is a Facebook group with that was set up via, I think, through dietitians, and I am terrible with social media, so I'm not on the Facebook page, but it was to provide a platform where dietitians and nutritionists with an interest in research can connect and debate the ins and outs, pros and cons, and scientific and clinical value of recent journal articles. So that sounds absolutely brilliant, actually. If I can get over my aversion to social media, I might join that. There's also a reviewer award for PEN each year that the BDA has. So again, just looking at the kind of nature of contribution that people have and that they've made, and the quality of the work that they've done, somebody is going to get acknowledged as the PEN reviewer of the year. So that's maybe something to work towards. Like anything else that you might be thinking of undertaking, there's going to be pros and there's going to be cons. And so you can see here, Katherine and I kind of put our heads together on this one, and we both felt that there were way more advantages than disadvantages. The disadvantage is a very substantial time commitment, but the extent of the time commitment really depends on what you're doing. There might be other disadvantages at a personal level, but the time is definitely something that you need to kind of take on board if you're going to be involved in this sort of work. But the pros are that you're inputting potentially into national policy. It's a really great way of building up your confidence. I mean, it's great if you start to see things that you've commented on in the past reflecting some of the things that you've said. That's a real boost. You have to be also, I suppose, a bit thick-skinned because, of course, with any consultation, you're going to be getting responses from multiple groups with differing views. And so it may be that you feel very strongly as a group or as an individual about something, but it doesn't mean that that response is going to be taken on board. It'll be acknowledged, but it won't necessarily change the guidance. So you do have to kind of take that one on the chin. But it is a terrific way of staying up to date with something. So, and it really, I suppose, any of the documents I've put consultation responses, I've developed consultation responses for, you're looking at a synthesis of lots of information together. So I'll often be noting something down and thinking, oh, I need to know more about this, or need to look this particular reference up. And so it's a great way for me to stay up to date. It also helps with your own critical appraisal skills. And Katherine was talking earlier about PEN and for example, the grading of the quality of evidence. And that's something that dietitians are very much trained in, but we don't always feel very confident about. And knowing that you can kind of hone your critical appraisal skills, but that somebody else will also be looking at it, so it's not all on you, that's a great way to get going. You'll be listed as a pathway reviewer with PEN as an international database because it's an international resource. For us as a profession, PEN, NICE, different documentations from different groups, they inform our work, they help improve our practice. And so we can have a voice in that if we start to contribute to consultations. There is also the potential for networking, and that might be within your specialist group or within the BDA, or it might be externally. So when I was a committee member for the NICE committee, I was mixing with multidisciplinary team from people from all over the country, people I wouldn't have met any other way. So it is a good networking opportunity. And if you're a voice for dietitians and you're coming across well as an authoritative person who's working collaboratively, that's making dietitians look good. You're presenting a very professional face for the organisation. It's really important that our work is recognised and valued. It's also at a personal level, it's really good for your own CV, and it also raises the profile of your own work and indeed your place of work, because you might actually be putting down, where you work as part of a background about yourself. You can help contribute to the development of specialty areas, and Katherine mentioned, new areas coming up in PEN that you might then contribute to. So, and there may be other benefits that we haven't thought about that you guys can think of. So no more than there might be disadvantages that we haven't thought of that you can think of, there are probably advantages as well. Just with regards to the specific disadvantage of time commitment, we thought that it really did depend on the extent to which you're involved, and the more complex the task, like anything else, the more time is going to be involved. So if you're looking at kind of being involved in a committee and putting together guidelines and so on, you're attending meetings, you're commenting on draft documents, you're helping put those documents together, etc., that is going to be quite a substantial time commitment. But if you're just, say, as a committee member, looking at a draft feedback that somebody else has put together, that's not a huge amount of time at all. It might be just as quick as, reading through what they've said and saying, yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think we need to say any more than that. So there's lots of different tasks that you can undertake, but depending on how many you take on and how complex they are, that will dictate the time that's required from you. And it also, of course, depends on you, on your level of expertise in the area that you're commenting on, and also your experience of being involved in the review process. If you have experience in that, and if it's an area that you're familiar with, then it probably takes you a bit less time than it would if you're really starting from scratch. But I would just say that both Katherine and I felt you don't have to jump in at the deep end. You can start small and get bigger. So you might want to start just as, you know, within my specialist group at the BDA, are we responding to consultations? Is there any possibility as a group of us responding to consultations within the committee? You know, shall I just comment on what somebody else has written? And that gives me a starting point. So, you know, there's multiple ways of getting involved. Okay. So we need you. We need you guys to get involved, and to if you do, you're going to be helping the profession, you're going to be helping yourself, but you're also going to be potentially changing practice to the benefit of our service users. So just with regards to the poll comments that you've already filled in the poll about whether you've been a reviewer or a contributor before to NICE or to PEN, or indeed to any other guidance. If you have any comments with regards to how you found the process and what the benefits and barriers were, any tips you would give, or if there's anything else you'd like to know, if you can just put those into the chat, that would be really, really helpful. And Katherine and I can have a look at the chat and review those comments. And I think I'm handing over to Katherine now.
Yes, thanks, Hilda. Yes, this is quite pertinent about people's experiences. There's a few things going on that we just wanted to make you aware of as well. So at present, in terms of the process, benefits, barriers and tips and things, there's two things that would love those of you who have been involved. I'll pop these in the chat shortly, but we encourage you to provide feedback on current NICE guidance production and presentation, because there's currently a review about that. So if you're interested in being involved, you can give that back to NICE and let them know. But also in my workplace, we're conducting a research project, and we've done that in consultation with the BDA Pendant Advisory Group, come up with some questions. So you can email me later if you'd like to be involved, and I'll send you the survey when it's live and ethically approved. So that'd be fantastic, and that'll be a bit more about the barriers from our profession, so we can actually work backwards and help this process further. So thank you very much for your time today, and moving on to questions.
I've just been looking at the chat, Katherine, and there's a couple of things in here. So one of them is from Elaine. She's saying, how do we improve working across dietetic specialisms? So there might be different groups commenting on weight management in the light of frailty, aging, comorbidities and so on. I would say, and I think this happens across multiple specialist groups of the BDA, that there's, you know, obesity is not just in the purview of the obesity specialist group, but of course it you know, it touches upon lots of others as well. So if you come across a consultation that you're thinking of responding to, it might be worth just emailing me to see if we're also putting together a response, and perhaps we put together a joint response, because your input would really help us to hone what we're saying and make sure that we're perhaps thinking about groups that we might not otherwise think of, and likewise our response might benefit you as well. So I'll put my email address into the chat in a moment for you, but I would just say that, you know, reach out, don't be shy. It's absolutely fine to kind of say, look, we're thinking about doing this. If we know of something going on, then we will always look to work with different groups, but we don't necessarily know who's going to be feeding back. So, you know, reach out, don't be shy. And Lewis Cara has said, really useful and interesting presentation. Thank you. That's very nice. On behalf of both of us, thank you. Being part of a NICE committee for review of a guideline, are there any particular challenges experienced? I can only speak from my own experience. And yeah, I mean, I think any committee, there are there are challenges in the sense that you're one voice among many, and while you might feel very passionately about something, it doesn't mean that everybody else on the group feels equally passionately. So there is, I suppose, a time to listen and a time to speak up. In that particular advisory committee, I learned a lot from what I heard other people say. A particular challenge for me was we had that first meeting and we'd agreed the kind of main points that we thought we wanted to focus on, and subsequently to that, the NICE folk put together a draft piece of work for us, a draft report or a guideline or whatever. They put together the draft quality standards and sent them out to us, and we then had the second meeting to kind of firm it up. And when I looked at the document, I was really unhappy with it because it had something in there about weight management interventions, that they should include a diet, activity, and or behaviour change. And I have been commenting on NICE guidelines for years now, saying it's not and or behaviour change, it's behaviour change is fundamental. There is no dietary change, there is no activity change unless behaviour changes. So it's not and or behaviour change. The behaviour change is fundamental to both diet and activity. So when I saw that in this quality standards, I was really upset, and so I wrote back and said, this is wrong, this is not optional, it's and behaviour change, it's not and or behaviour change. And when we got to the meeting, it was still and or behaviour change. So I brought it up. I was a bit nervous about it, to be honest, but I brought it up and said, look, this is actually incorrect, and I explained why it was incorrect. And the response I got was, that can't be changed because we're using a definition that's already been decided by another NICE group. And I said, but it's wrong. It's the wrong definition. And there was quite a debate about it. I went away feeling really, really irritated, to be honest. I thought, I can't believe I've trekked twice up to Manchester and something's going to go out that I know is wrong. And I've said it's wrong and they're not listening to me, because of how the organisation is structured and how they do things. But actually, they did subsequently change it. So I think it had been agreed in a previous meeting that this was the right definition. But one of the people who was on that previous committee was also on this committee and realised when I fed back, they realised it was wrong. And then they did agree to change it, which was brilliant. And I did find that really quite difficult because to me, it was just so obvious that it was wrong. And I was thinking, how can you not see this, but also, I suppose I had to be really careful what I said and how I said it so that I wasn't aggressive or rude, or, you have to be so careful how you say things. So I did find that challenging. And I suppose you always just have to take on the chin that what comes out of any kind of consultation is not necessarily what you want to come out of it. It's going to perhaps be a compromise between lots of differing views. And it's the same for me if I'm pulling together a draft response for the obesity group and I've got responses from 10 different people saying, I think this should be in, this should be in, this should be in. And some of them will be, in direct conflict with each other. And I then have to sit there and think, well, which one do I go with? They can't both be in, they can't both be two conflicting views can't be in the same guideline or in the same response. So I suppose that's always the thing, is that taking part doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome's going to be exactly what you want it to be, but at least you're taking part in the process, and at least you're starting to understand the process and how you can potentially influence it. So I guess it's a long game. Sorry, that was a very, very long answer.
No, that's wonderful. And it's those sort of responses we want to hear more about so we can influence the change for our discipline and the wider. So that's fantastic. Elaine, you have your hand up. So I just thought I'd ask you what your question was. Yes, Elaine, can you type in the chat, or can you unmute yourself? Would that be possible? Okay. There was a comment in the chat from Georgiana. For the pen review experience, there was lots of support throughout the process from Eleanor and the BDA. The review was performed as a group, which was very useful and facilitated the learning process. It was time consuming but very beneficial, particularly if it is immediately relevant to your specialist area. So that's Wonderful. And we're having some nice comments. Thank you very much. And there's extra information in the chat how to sign up for the BDA, and I believe this copy of slides and recording will be available. Any other questions?
I've put my email into the chat for anybody from another specialist group who might be thinking of responding to a consultation that they think, oh, maybe the obesity specialist group is also responding. So you can get in touch if you want to do so.
Eleanor, you're typing. Is there anything else you want to add or say as well?
Oh, thank you very much. I just thought, yeah, perfect. Might be easier to come on. And just going to comment on what Hilda was just saying then. So if any specialist groups, I imagine that was what Elaine's question was going to be about, but she looks like her screen's frozen. But if there's any specialist groups that would like to get together and respond to a consultation, what we tend to do is send them out to a few specialist groups that we know are relevant. But it might not mean that, you know, we might have missed someone. There might be another specialist group that's really keen to respond. So if you email the consultation at inbox, and we can always then put you in touch. So we know that Hilda manages the responses from the obesity specialist group, so we could always put you in touch that way. So again, if you don't have the specialist group's email address, if you email the consultations@bda.uk.com that's in the chat, we can put you in touch with each other. It's no problem. But I also wanted to say, like Katherine and Hilda, and I know there's some comments echoed in the chat as well. I think that was a really brilliant presentation. There's loads of tips shared, and it's great to hear the benefits, especially from you guys that have the experience of responding already, on how to get involved with PEN and NICE, and also the other national and international consultations. I've put a link in for NICE, but you can also respond to sign consultations. It's just not as easy to follow on their website. I think you have to email them separately. But if you are responding to any, just please let us know. Check with us beforehand if anyone else has signed up. So then we can just make sure that we're aware of the consultations that have been submitted. So what we'll do is we'll ask you to send them to us, and then we'll send them on to NICE if it's outside of a specialist group.
I've just noticed an earlier comment from Elaine to say that the BDA older people specialist group also does a very similar thing to what the obesity specialist group does. So I think, you know, I think there's a lot of really good practice going on within the profession and across different specialist groups.
I think Elaine might have managed to return. Elaine, did you have a specific comment or question that you'd like to unmute yourself for?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, connection went down, and I just want to say, Hilda, thank you for your presentation. You virtually mirror exactly what we do in the Older People's Committee, the Older People Specialist Committee, and have been for quite some time. So Eleanor and the team would let us know of something, and it's usually myself who would actually register things for NICE and pull things together, and then as the committee would look at that and then submit. So it's really interesting to hear that the process, although the title might be different in terms of consultation officer and kind of education resources, but that is what it kind of covers, that role. So thank you. Just regarding the comment that I put in about the weight management, it was something that did think about, but we felt it wasn't particularly exclusive of older people, but we saw that your team and the BDA were involved, but equally we would have some views, I suppose, about maintaining muscle mass and sort of the geriatric nutrition guidelines that are around having to really think about reducing weight. But so we haven't registered, but I guess sometimes we feel we're not always connected. So anything we can improve to make things, you know, as robust and as holistic. And, you know, we do sort of send things into the consultation. And Eleanor, you were kind of before COVID, our email boxes were quite full. I know things have changed a little bit since COVID, but yeah, it's just being aware that sometimes, especially older people, we could list almost all of them because most people will have nearly all of the conditions, but obviously some of them, for example, like weight management, diabetes, would be owned by that particular specialism, but would have a nuance from an older people's perspective. So just to raise that, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know if you were in the meeting or not, because I saw your earlier comment, and I just said that you'd said in the chat that you virtually do exactly what we do in the obesity group, you do in the older people group, which is great because it just shows how much good practice is out there. But I mean, I should say it's so important that, you know, we have a holistic approach, and there'll be things with regards to older people that we perhaps wouldn't think of in the same way as you guys. We wouldn't have the same awareness of the needs perhaps of older people as you would, and there likewise might be things that we would think of that you wouldn't. So, you know, say get in touch. I put my email into the chat as well. So if there are things that you're thinking, well, you know, we want to make sure we don't want to necessarily put in a response ourselves, but we do want to make sure the older people perspective gets in there, you can always get in touch, and we can figure out what we can, whether we can do a joint response or something like that. It's no worries. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I think we might be able to thank everyone for their help, and the BDA with their help with creating our presentation. It's been a pleasure working with you, Hilda, and thank you for coming. Yes.
Yeah, so, it's been really good, and thank you very much to Charlotte and Eleanor and all the others at the BDA who've helped us, and to all of you for giving up your time in the evening to come along, and for your interest in our work. So thank you so much.